video tutorial is all about reflex actions. Reflex actions are responses to changes in the environment that do not involve any processing in the brain to coordinate the movement. So the nervous pathway is as short as possible so that the reflexes are as quick as possible. Most reflex pathways consist of just 3 neurons: the sensory neuron, relay neuron, motor neuron. The brain may be informed that the reflex has happened, but is not involved in the coordination of the response. Reflex actions always have a survival value. So a reflex may be used to get out of danger, to avoid damage to part of the body, or it might be to maintain balance. Now, the 2 specific reflex actions that you need to know about are the blinking reflex and the knee-jerk reflex. But first, we're just going to run through one of the reflex arcs that you should have come across at GCSE. So here we have an individual on the slide who has accidentally dropped their hand into the flame of a candle. So the stimulus in this case is the heat from the candle flame, and that heat is going to be detected by the thermoreceptors in the skin. The thermoreceptors are going to initiate an action potential in the sensory neuron. That action potential is going to pass to the spinal cord, the central nervous system, where a reflex neuron is going to pass that impulse across the spinal cord from the sensory neuron to a motor neuron. The motor neuron is going to pass that impulse to the muscle, the effector, which is going to contract really, really rapidly, enabling this individual to lift their hand away from the flame. So to the blinking reflex then. The blinking reflex causes temporary closure of the eyelids to protect the eyes from damage. The nervous pathway for the blinking reflex passes through part of the brain. In other words, the reflex is a cranial reflex. However, the pathway is a direct pathway that does not involve any thought processes in the higher order parts of the brain. Since the receptor and effector are in the same place, this is called a reflex arc. So blinking may be stimulated by sudden changes in the environment, such as a foreign object touching the eye, in which case it'd be known more specifically as the corneal reflex. It might be caused by sudden bright light, in which case it'd be an example of an optical reflex. It could be as a result of really loud sounds or sudden movements really close to the eye. So here we have on the slide now a corneal reflex, a type of blinking reflex. This reflex is mediated by a sensory neuron from the cornea, which enters the pons. The pons being a section of the brain that hopefully you remember from our lesson on the brain. A synapse connects a sensory neuron to a relay neuron, which passes the action potential to the motor neuron. The motor neuron passes back out of the brain to the facial muscles, causing the eyelid to blink. This is a very short and direct pathway, so the corneal reflex is rapid. It takes about 0.1 seconds. The corneal reflex usually causes both eyes to blink, even if only one cornea is affected. The optical reflex, being another example of a blinking reflex, protects the light-sensitive cells of the retina from damage. The stimulus is detected by the retina, and the reflex is mediated by the optical center in the cerebral cortex. The optical reflex is a little slower than the corneal reflex, but still rapid. Finally, the knee-jerk reflex. The knee-jerk reflex is a spinal reflex. The nervous pathway passes through the spinal cord rather than through the brain. The knee-jerk reflex is involved in coordinated movement and balance. So the muscle at the front of the thigh, i.e. the quadriceps, contract to straighten the leg. This muscle is attached to the lower leg via the patella tendon that connects the patella to the lower leg bones at the front of the knee. When the muscles at the front of the thigh are stretched, specialized stretch receptors detect the increase in length of the muscle. If this stretching is unexpected, a reflex action causes contraction of the same muscle. This is part of the mechanism that enables us to balance on two legs. So consider this, a situation where you are standing still. Under these conditions, the muscles in front of the thigh will stretch if the knee is bending or the body is starting to lean backwards. Contraction of the muscles straightens the knee or brings the body back over the legs. Such a response must be very rapid so that the body can remain balanced. The knee-jerk reaction is unusual in that the nervous pathway consists of only two neurons, the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. Therefore, there is one less synapse involved and the response is even quicker.